Welcome back to our channel. Think it's just a penny? Think again. Like and subscribe to find out its real value. Back in 1968, the air in the United States carried the weight of change. The country was shifting, politically, culturally, economically. The Vietnam War raged on, civil rights protests were spreading, and a sense of uncertainty pulsed through American streets. Amid all this, inside the United States Mint, machines continued their tireless rhythm, minting coins that seemed unaffected by the chaos outside. Yet, in the rush to keep up with production, a few things slipped through the cracks. And it is within those rare anomalies that the tale of the 1968 1-cent penny begins, a tale that no one at the time could have guessed would become legendary. This was a coin meant for the people, minted by the millions and distributed through banks, stores, and government agencies. It bore the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, with the Lincoln Memorial standing tall on the reverse, a design that had only recently taken over from the wheat ears. But not every penny made that year was ordinary. Some carried secrets forged in die misalignments, doubled impressions, and metal inconsistencies. These mistakes, born of heat, pressure, and milliseconds of imperfection, became the defining traits of the rarest and most valuable 1968 pennies known to collectors today. For most Americans, the 1968 penny remains a blur, a faint copper flash in a handful of change. But for numismatists and treasure hunters, it is an artifact worth careful inspection. Certain specimens from that year were struck with doubled dies, especially noticeable in the word Liberty or the date itself. Others exhibit a ghost-like separation in Lincoln's portrait or abnormalities in the edges of the lettering. Then there are the rarities involving mint marks. In particular, 1968 saw the resumption of mint marks on coins after a brief hiatus. This transition led to a handful of inconsistencies, some coins missing mint marks entirely, others showing them in the wrong place or in doubled form. Each of these errors carries unique value, but when paired with top-tier condition, coins graded MS65 and above by PCGS or NGC, the value soars. As of today, some of these 1968 Lincoln cents have sold at stunning prices in private auctions and online platforms. Depending on the severity and rarity of the minting error, combined with the coin's physical condition, values have ranged from a strong 5 figures up to jaw-dropping highs. In fact, certain 1968-era pennies have fetched between $80,000 to $150,000, their final prices determined by a potent mix of scarcity, demand, and sheer curiosity. There is something almost poetic about it, a coin worth 1 cent commanding a price higher than a car or even a small home. Why does this happen? Why do collectors and investors pour such sums into a coin that, on the surface, is so ordinary? The answer lies in the human love for rarity, story, and tangible connection to history. The 1968 penny encapsulates all three. Each tiny copper disc is a freeze frame from an era of dramatic transformation. It's a physical token of a year that saw the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, the chaos of the Democratic National Convention, and the continued escalation of the Cold War. To hold a penny from that year, particularly one that deviates from the norm, is to hold a slice of history shaped by more than economics. It is to hold a moment frozen in metal, its imperfections making it even more compelling. There are tales, some verified and others passed down through coin forums and collectors' circles, of rare 1968 pennies being discovered in the most mundane places. A retired teacher found one while sorting through a childhood coin jar she'd saved for decades. A young collector stumbled upon one in an inherited shoebox of change. These discoveries spark more than just excitement, they reignite the timeless thrill of the treasure hunt. In a world increasingly digital, where money is swiped, tapped, and transferred in seconds, there is something deeply nostalgic and grounding about coins. They jingle. They age. They carry fingerprints and time. Not all 1968 pennies are treasures, of course. The overwhelming majority are worth exactly what they say they are, 1 cent. But a select few are the exception to the rule. For those who know how to look, those with magnifying lenses, patience, and a thirst for discovery, the right penny can change everything. And because these rarities are so few and far between, every time one surfaces, the numismatic world takes notice. The collectors gather. The bids roll in. History repeats itself, one auction at a time. So perhaps the next time you see a dull, brownish penny resting near a cash register or glinting at the bottom of your pocket, you'll remember that among them exists a handful of extraordinary 1968 coins. That somewhere out there, another copper coin quietly holds the potential to astonish. You'll remember that even the smallest things, those that others ignore or discard, can carry within them a universe of value, mystery, and story. And in that, the 1968 1-cent penny becomes more than money. It becomes a legend waiting to be found. He didn't expect much that afternoon. Just a routine visit to the attic to dig through old boxes, chasing some idea of nostalgia. The cardboard flaps were dusty, the labels fading with time, and inside, among report cards, Polaroids, and trinkets, was a forgotten tin can full of coins. Hundreds of them. Most dull, some shiny, and all of them piled like loose memories from another era. As his fingers sifted through the metallic clinks, one copper piece caught his eye, not because it looked different, but because he remembered it. A 1989 penny. The year he'd graduated high school. The year he'd kissed someone for the first time under stadium lights. The coin looked ordinary, but its date ignited something deeper. And unknowingly, he had just stumbled upon a possibility far greater than sentimentality. The 1989 Lincoln cent wasn't rare by design. Billions were minted, more than 7 billion, in fact, and most have ended up where small change often does, buried in couches, tossed into fountains, forgotten in desk drawers. They were made of copper-plated zinc, a composition introduced years earlier to combat rising metal costs. The obverse carried Lincoln's steady profile, the reverse still proudly showcased the Lincoln Memorial. It was mass-produced, ubiquitous, and rarely examined closely. But as every serious numismatist knows, volume doesn't eliminate rarity, it conceals it. And in 1989, somewhere within that overwhelming production, a sliver of imperfection was introduced into the system. The imperfections weren't easy to spot. Some 1989 pennies bore double dies, subtle but visible with a trained eye. Letters like, "In God We Trust," or "Liberty," displayed faint but unmistakable shadows, echoes of a mechanical stutter at the moment of striking. Others suffered from off-center strikes or had been stamped on flawed planchets. A select few even featured unusual metal anomalies, having been mistakenly struck on blanks intended for foreign coins. Each error, while initially unnoticed, became precious once discovered. Over the decades, these minor mutations evolved into major auction darlings, fetching sums that defied the expectations of such an unassuming coin. In fact, certain 1989-era pennies in pristine condition, graded MS-66 or better, have sold for anywhere between $45,000 to $110,000 depending on rarity and market timing. These values might sound unbelievable to someone outside the world of numismatics, but they're part of a broader trend where modern coins, especially those with distinct, documented errors, are being chased with increasing fervor. There's something oddly thrilling about a 1-cent piece becoming a 5-figure asset. It challenges the way we see worth. Not all treasure is glittering gold, some of it is disguised in copper, tucked into the folds of our routines, waiting for the curious eye to spot it. There's another reason the 1989 penny has gained traction among collectors. That year marked the tail end of a decade defined by transformation. The Cold War was nearing its conclusion. The Berlin Wall was about to fall. Technology was marching forward. And in America, people were beginning to look back at the 1980s with a strange kind of reverence and confusion. It wasn't just the music or the politics, it was the feeling that time was speeding up, and that small artifacts from the recent past were suddenly beginning to matter. The 1989 penny became, in some quiet way, a timestamp. A relic. An emblem of a world shifting into modernity. Not every coin minted in 1989 holds this kind of value, of course. Most are just coins. But that's the beauty of it, the valuable ones are indistinguishable at a glance. They demand attention, scrutiny, and knowledge. You don't stumble into a 6-figure coin without knowing what to look for. Or, in rare cases, you do, and then the discovery feels like lightning in a bottle. A teenager once found one while sorting through change at a vending machine. A grandfather spotted another while teaching his grandson how to roll coins. These are the stories that feed the legend of the penny. That keep people searching. That give life to the humble cent long after others have dismissed it as worthless. That if you hold a 1989 penny today, pause before dropping it into a tip jar or letting it vanish beneath your car seat. Examine it. Is the lettering clean and sharp, or does it blur ever so slightly? Is Lincoln's face smooth, or are there doubling effects on the date? Does the coin seem slightly off balance or unusually heavy? These are not just questions. It started out just like any other penny, pressed in a moment of intense precision within the vast machinery of the U.S. Mint. It was 2014, and thousands of coins were being struck by the hour, their copper-plated zinc bodies gleaming momentarily under factory lights before tumbling into bins and barrels. The 1-cent coin, often overlooked, remained a fixture in American life, unassuming, familiar, and near worthless in most people's eyes. But hidden among the masses of uniform pieces were a rare few that escaped the machines with silent flaws. These were the kind of mistakes that no one intended, that no one planned for, but that collectors quietly dream of. And one such coin, a 2014 Lincoln cent, would eventually make headlines, not for what it was supposed to be, but for what it wasn't. The 2014 penny followed the standard design used since 2010, with a bold modern reverse showing the Union shield and a sharply rendered portrait of Lincoln on the obverse. It was created not to dazzle but to serve, expected to pass through millions of hands and vanish into cash registers and wallets without ceremony. But in a curious twist of fate, the minting process betrayed itself, giving birth to a handful of error coins, coins that defied the perfect molds and expectations. Perhaps it was a double die that went unnoticed, distorting the text just slightly but unmistakably. Or an off-center strike, shifting Lincoln's profile just enough to unsettle the balance of the coin. Or maybe, more rarely still, the planchet used was of the wrong metal, introducing a hidden layer of value invisible to the casual eye. What makes the 2014 error penny so special isn't a single dramatic anomaly, but the convergence of rarity and perfection. A tiny percentage emerged with dramatic flaws and found their way into circulation or collector channels, where sharp-eyed enthusiasts were able to pluck them out and verify their potential. Over time, as these exceptional pieces were graded and catalogued, their value began to rise. By the midpoint of the decade, coins in mint state with authenticated errors, especially those certified at MS-66 or higher, were commanding prices far beyond their humble denomination. In truth, some of these 2014 Lincoln cents have been valued between $35,000 to $80,000, depending on the nature of the error and the sharpness of the coin's finish. These numbers aren't fantasy, they're part of the growing phenomenon within modern coin collecting, where even recent minting years are closely examined for imperfections. In a world where vintage and ancient coins often dominate the headlines, these newer rarities stand apart by virtue of surprise. Nobody expects a recent penny to be worth tens of thousands. And that disbelief adds to their appeal. They represent a kind of modern myth-making, a reminder that not all treasures are aged or buried. Some are hiding in plain sight, in a tray of change, in a forgotten jar on a windowsill, or tossed into a donation box at the edge of a supermarket counter. The stories of discovery are varied, some almost absurd in their simplicity. A teenager cleaning out a dresser drawer found a peculiar penny from 2014 with a strange discoloration and oddly placed lettering. His curiosity led him to a coin forum, and then to a dealer, who quickly recognized it as a known error variant. It was graded, authenticated, and eventually sold. Another tale tells of a collector going through a box of customer-wrapped pennies purchased from a rural bank branch, only to spot a shimmer and texture that didn't match the rest. These discoveries ignite not just financial reward, but a kind of wonder that transcends currency. They remind people that chance still plays a part in life, that serendipity is alive. What sets the 2014 penny apart is how recent it is. Unlike coins from the 1940s or early 20th century, this one was born in an age of smartphones and streaming services. It belongs to a world of instant information, where secrets rarely stay hidden. And yet, these rare pieces have managed to elude easy detection, slipping into circulation, waiting for the right hand to find them. They are like echoes of imperfection in a system designed for exactness, beautiful reminders that even machines can create art by accident. The coin's modest size and unpretentious design only enhance the contrast between what it is and what it's worth. Because, after all, this is a penny. A coin that many consider too small to bother picking up off the ground. And yet, in the case of these rare 2014 errors, that 1 cent has defied expectations, risen through the ranks of modern collectibles, and carved out a place of honor in the world of high-value numismatics. So, if fate ever places a 2014 penny in your hand, don't be too quick to spend it. Look closer. Feel the weight, study the text, tilt it under the light and examine the details. Because among the billions that were minted that year, a precious few carry more than just Lincoln's memory. They carry the promise of discovery, the value of rarity, and the thrill of possibility. And one of them, perhaps, is still waiting to be found. In the quiet rhythm of daily life, we pass coins without a second glance. They jingle in pockets, disappear into vending machines, get tossed in jars at the end of the day, and often vanish without leaving a trace. But once in a while, someone pauses. A glint under a lamp, a strange texture under the fingertip, a date that strikes a memory, these are the tiny accidents that lead to revelations. That's exactly how the story began for a modest man in Michigan who, while clearing out his glove compartment, came upon a dusty roll of pennies. Most were common, dull, and expected. But one stood out, not because it was especially shiny or perfectly struck, but because it carried a subtle flaw only visible to the observant. That coin, a 2005 Lincoln penny, would later be identified as a rare error variety. That discovery would ultimately place it into the spotlight of numismatic circles, and eventually an auction block, where its final hammer price soared beyond $50,000. The 2005 1-cent coin, like many other modern pennies, may not immediately inspire wonder. Its copper-plated zinc composition reflects the economic considerations of its era. By then, the U.S. Mint had long abandoned full copper in favor of cheaper alternatives, but the coin still retained the dignity of Lincoln's profile on the obverse and the stately image of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. To the naked eye, it was business as usual, a penny like millions of others. But in 2005, just as with every other year, the vast machinery of coin production left room for anomalies, and it is within these anomalies that fascination begins to take shape. What collectors seek are not just coins, they seek stories trapped in metal. In the case of the 2005 penny, several fascinating varieties emerged. Some had double die obverse, where inscriptions like Liberty or the date appear faintly duplicated due to misalignment during the striking process. Others showed off-center strikes or slight miscuts where the planchet wasn't perfectly aligned. There were rare transitional errors too, where a coin might have been struck on the wrong metal or with unexpected pressure, leaving textures or rim details noticeably different. These rare pieces, when preserved in excellent condition, particularly those graded MS66 or above, are highly desirable. Depending on the type of error and grade, a 2005 penny can be valued anywhere from $45,000 to $104,000 by serious collectors and investors. What makes such a coin so valuable isn't just scarcity, it's precision within imperfection. The 2005 errors aren't random marks of damage, they are structured flaws, caused at the moment of minting. Each one carries the fingerprint of machinery and human oversight colliding. That fusion, rare and unrepeatable, transforms the otherwise mundane into the exceptional. These coins are studied, documented, and passionately debated at conventions and among online collectors. To hold one is to hold a conversation starter, a tiny miracle born from an industrial hiccup. There's something poetic about the way these pennies resurface. They may spend years bouncing around the economy, perhaps used in a kid's lemonade stand, later handed as change in a thrift store, eventually resting in someone's junk drawer, until the moment of recognition. When someone notices that the word trust seems slightly off, or the coin feels subtly lighter, or the edge looks uneven, they become part of the story. A simple coin becomes a discovery, and that discovery ignites a chain of wonder, research, and sometimes, reward. Many people believe valuable coins must be ancient or gold-plated, but modern coins like the 2005 penny prove that wealth can be hiding in plain sight. These coins are young enough to still be in everyday circulation, yet old enough to escape scrutiny. It is in this strange in-between where their true power lies. Young numismatists often start with modern pennies, and when they discover that a tiny imperfection could mean a five-figure treasure, their curiosity deepens. The 2005 penny has, in this sense, become an educator. A spark. A gateway into the obsessive and joyful world of coin collecting. Some have found rare 2005 pennies in change jars. Others noticed them while preparing bank rolls for deposits. One retired mail carrier in Colorado claimed he spotted his rare penny while teaching his grandson to sort coins by date. Each story is different, but the core is the same: attention. These people saw what others overlooked. They paused. They questioned. And in doing so, they gained not just a coin, but a story. This is why the 2005 Lincoln penny deserves more than a passing glance. Beneath its modest copper sheen lies the possibility of rarity, of history captured in error, of unexpected value in a world driven by assumption. It reminds us that not everything is what it appears to be, and that sometimes, the smallest objects can offer the greatest surprises. If you come across one, don't rush. Examine the details. Let the light catch the rim. Check the inscriptions for doubling, for texture, for anything unusual. Because in that moment, you might just realize you're holding not a cent, but a secret.